I'm going to ask you a question that most Americans never stop to think about. If wood burns so easily, why are millions of American families perfectly comfortable living inside wooden houses? To someone visiting from Europe, Asia, or South America, the neighborhoods can feel almost unreal. Street after street is filled with homes built almost entirely from lumber. No concrete walls. No brick structures. Just wooden frames hidden beneath layers of siding. It seems like a disaster waiting to happen. Wouldn't a brick house be stronger? Safer? More durable? If hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, termites, and fires all exist in the United States, why would anyone keep building with wood? The answer isn't what most people think. In fact, the reason has almost nothing to do with tradition. It's a story about geography, economics, engineering, and one decision made centuries ago that shaped the entire American housing market. And once you understand it, you'll never look at an American neighborhood the same way again. The first thing most people assume is that wooden houses exist because timber is cheap. They're right, but only partially. To understand why wood became America's favorite building material, you have to go back hundreds of years, long before skyscrapers, highways, and sprawling suburbs existed. When European settlers first arrived in North America, they encountered something that was almost unimaginable by European standards. Forests. Not small patches of trees. Entire regions covered by endless forests stretching farther than the eye could see. Millions upon millions of acres were filled with oak, pine, maple, cedar, spruce, fir, and dozens of other species. For the settlers, this wasn't just scenery. It was the most valuable natural resource they had. Unlike Europe, where centuries of construction had already consumed enormous amounts of timber, North America seemed almost limitless. Building materials were literally growing everywhere. Instead of transporting expensive stone over long distances or manufacturing millions of bricks, settlers could simply cut nearby trees and begin building immediately. It was faster. It was cheaper. And perhaps most importantly, it required far fewer specialized workers. A small group of people could build a wooden home using relatively simple tools. Stone construction demanded skilled masons. Brick construction required kilns, clay, transportation, and much more labor. Wood solved nearly every problem. So from the very beginning, America developed a completely different building culture than many older civilizations. And once that culture took hold, it became incredibly difficult to replace. But that's only the beginning of the story. Because something happened during the 1800s that completely transformed American construction forever. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change factories. It changed houses. Before the 19th century, building a wooden home was still a slow process. Large beams had to be carefully cut. Complex joints had to be carved by skilled craftsmen. Every connection required precision. Then two inventions quietly revolutionized everything. The first was the steam-powered sawmill. Suddenly, lumber could be produced faster than ever before. Instead of manually cutting every board, industrial sawmills could process enormous quantities of timber at remarkable speed. Prices dropped dramatically. Wood became even more accessible. But an even bigger breakthrough came from something surprisingly small. The humble nail. For centuries, nails were handmade. That made them expensive. Builders actually reused nails from demolished buildings because producing new ones required significant labor. Then machine-made nails entered mass production. Overnight, something that had once been valuable became incredibly affordable. That may sound insignificant. It wasn't. Cheap nails changed architecture. Instead of relying on complicated wooden joints that required experienced craftsmen, builders could simply connect smaller pieces of lumber with thousands of inexpensive nails. This new method became known as balloon framing. Instead of using massive beams, houses could be assembled from standardized boards. Construction became dramatically faster. Workers needed less specialized training. Entire homes could be built in a fraction of the previous time. It was almost like moving from handcrafted watches to modern assembly lines. The impact was enormous. As settlers expanded westward across the continent, they needed housing quickly. Entire towns appeared almost overnight. Wood framing made that possible. Without it, the rapid expansion of the United States might have looked very different. And the innovation didn't stop there. Balloon framing eventually evolved into platform framing, the method still used in most American homes today. If you've ever seen a new neighborhood under construction, you've probably noticed something curious. At first, the houses almost look fragile. Just rows of wooden studs, open walls, exposed floors. Some people even joke that they resemble giant wooden skeletons. But appearances can be misleading. Once the structural sheathing, insulation, drywall, roofing, siding, and interior finishes are installed, that seemingly delicate frame becomes an incredibly sophisticated engineering system. Every wall supports another. Floors distribute weight. Roof trusses transfer loads. Metal connectors reinforce critical joints. The entire structure works together as one integrated unit. And despite what many people believe, these homes aren't built without regulations. Far from it. Modern residential construction in the United States follows detailed building codes that specify everything from structural strength to wind resistance, snow loads, fire protection, and energy efficiency. Those codes vary depending on location because America isn't one environment. It's dozens of different climates. A house in Arizona faces completely different challenges than one in Minnesota. A coastal home in Florida must withstand hurricane-force winds. A mountain cabin in Colorado has to carry heavy snow loads. Homes in California must meet strict seismic requirements because earthquakes are a real concern. That flexibility is actually one of wood's greatest strengths. Unlike concrete or masonry, wood is relatively lightweight. And in earthquake-prone regions, lighter buildings often experience lower forces during seismic events. Imagine holding a heavy hammer versus a lightweight stick while someone suddenly shakes your arm. Which one creates more force? The heavier object. Buildings behave in surprisingly similar ways. That's one reason why modern wood frame construction performs remarkably well in many earthquakes. The structure isn't trying to resist every movement through sheer mass. Instead, it bends. It flexes. It absorbs energy. Engineers actually design for controlled movement rather than complete rigidity. It's a concept that seems counterintuitive until you realize that flexibility can sometimes be stronger than stiffness. But if earthquakes aren't the biggest weakness of wooden houses, then what is? Most people immediately answer with one word: fire. And that's exactly where one of the biggest misconceptions begins. We'll get to that in just a moment, because the reality of fire safety in modern American homes is far more surprising than most people expect, and it helps explain why millions of families continue choosing wood generation after generation. Most people assume that because a house is made of wood, it's automatically far more dangerous in a fire. At first glance, that sounds completely logical. Wood burns. Everyone knows that. But modern home construction is far more complicated than simply asking what the walls are made from. In fact, one of the biggest threats during a house fire isn't the wooden frame at all. It's what's inside the house. Think about the average American living room. The sofa is filled with foam. The television contains plastics. Curtains, carpets, cabinets, mattresses, clothing, electronics, books, toys, and countless household items are all combustible to varying degrees. That's why the safety of a modern home isn't determined by its framing material alone. It depends on how the entire system works together, from building codes and engineering design to the fire safety measures that are built into the home long before anyone moves in. And that helps explain one important thing. American houses aren't built from wood because it's the only material available. And they certainly aren't built that way because builders don't know how to use other materials. They're built from wood because, for centuries, it has provided the best overall balance of cost, speed of construction, availability, and performance. So the next time you drive through a typical American suburb filled with wooden houses, you'll probably see it a little differently. Because behind every one of those homes lies centuries of history, abundant natural resources, the Industrial Revolution, and generations of engineering innovation. And that's why, even today, wood remains the primary building material for millions of American families.